There's a thing that happens when you try to describe the amazing world of Gumball to someone who hasn't seen it. You start with something simple, like it's a cartoon about a cat, which is technically accurate. And then you have to mention that the cat has a goldfish for a brother, except the goldfish used to be a pet until he grew legs, at which point the family adopted him, and nobody finds this unusual. And they live in a world where the backgrounds are real photographs, but the characters are a mix of 2D drawings and 3D models and puppets and occasionally live-action humans walking through the scene. And somewhere in season 3, the show starts very quietly, building a case that the entire universe might be fictional and could dissolve at any moment. By that point, you've usually lost whoever you are explaining this to, which is a shame, because it's a genuinely good show. It ran on Cartoon Network from 2011 to 2019, built up a large and rather devoted fan base, and accumulated across those years a reasonable stack of fan theories, behind-the-scenes stories, character analyses, and small controversies. The kind of material that sits nicely across a couple of hours when you have nowhere particular to be. The original series ran to 240 episodes across those 8 years. That's a large body of work for an animated show of its kind, and the fact that the show was building a coherent mythology across all of it, while also making individual episodes that worked as self-contained comedies, is part of what makes it rewatchable in the way it is. It also came back. In 2025, the show returned under the name The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball on Hulu, picking up storylines that had been left unresolved for 6 years, so it isn't quite finished. But the original run has more than enough in it to keep us going tonight. There is something about this show that rewards returning to it. Things that looked like throwaway gags in 2013 turn out to have been planted carefully. Background characters who appeared for 30 seconds in season 1 turn out to have the most interesting arcs in the whole series. It's the kind of program where, years later, people are still finding things. If you're not familiar with Gumball and are just here for something calm to drift off to, that's completely fine. Nothing requires prior knowledge. And if you grew up with the show and are here for the same reason, then some of this will be revisiting old territory and some of it will be things you hadn't quite heard before. Tonight we'll go through it all, one section at a time, in no particular rush. Each section stands on its own. You can drift in and out. Nothing requires you to have been awake for the previous one. And if you'd like more of this kind of thing, the subscribe button is there. No urgency about it. Let's start at the beginning, which for Gumball means starting with rejection. Ben Bockley grew up in France and eventually moved to London, where he spent several years working at an animation studio called Studio AKA, doing commercial work. This is not, on the face of it, a thrilling origin story, but the relevant detail about the commercial work is what kept happening to his character designs. He would create something for a client, the client would say no, and the character would go into a folder and go nowhere. After a while, he had accumulated a collection of these cartoon characters that had been created for advertisements and then rejected and filed away. In 2007, he joined Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, a studio the network had set up in London. His initial job was to help other people develop and pitch their show ideas to the network, not to pitch his own. He was there in a supporting capacity, but he had those characters sitting in a folder. And while he was helping other people develop their pitches, he started thinking about what to do with them. The first idea was quite specific, a remedial school for cartoon characters who hadn't made it. Characters who had been rejected by the industry or cancelled or failed to catch on, brought together in one school where they'd try to learn how to be more marketable, more relatable, suitable for broadcast, a school for cartoons that didn't fit anywhere. He pitched this. The producers looked at it and said it felt too sad, which is an interesting response to a children's television concept, but there it is. Too sad. The producers were not wrong exactly. A show about rejected characters trying to become acceptable is a fairly melancholy premise underneath the comedy. So Bockeley revised it. He kept the spirit of the thing, but changed the frame. Instead of a remedial school, a family sitcom built around an unusual cast, set in a fictional American suburb. The characters were still visually strange, still not the kind of people you'd normally centre a show around. But now they had a home, and domestic routines, and parents who worked, and children who went to school. And then he named all the main characters after his own family. Nicole, the mother, is based on Bockeley's actual mother. He described her in an interview as his kick-ass mum. The show's version is an extraordinarily capable woman who works full-time, manages an entirely chaotic household, and operates with the temperament of someone running significantly past what any reasonable person should be asked to handle. Richard, the father, was described by Bockeley as a giant man-child. The show's Richard is a large, cheerful, spectacularly unhelpful rabbit who hasn't held a job in years, and whose decision-making is roughly at the level of a well-meaning 10-year-old. This is affectionately meant, presumably. Anais, the youngest child, is named after Bockeley's actual sister. In the show, she's 4 years old, significantly more intelligent than anyone else in the family, and occasionally frustrated by this, but mostly just getting on with it. And Gumball is Bockeley himself. The name came from an exercise of trying to think of random objects a child might have in their pockets. Gum, a ball, a gumball. The main character of what became a long-running animated series is named after something you'd find in a jacket pocket, which is a very specific kind of logic, and is also very consistent with the rest of the show. The show went into production and premiered in May 2011. Cartoon Network had renewed it for a second season before the first one even aired, which suggests someone at the network was confident about it before the audience had a chance to weigh in. The audience, when it did weigh in, was enthusiastic. Here is the part I find genuinely charming about all of this. The original premise was a school for rejected cartoon characters. The revised premise was a family sitcom, but the cast of the family sitcom was still, in significant part, those rejected commercial characters. The ones the client said no to. A banana, a cloud, a ghost, a piece of toast. They all live in Elmore now. They go to school, they have families, they exist. The show about rejected characters still contains actual rejected characters. They're not presented as tragic. They're not dwelling on having been turned down. They're just there, being fine, going about their days. The show built a world and filled it with things nobody else had found a use for. Whether Bockeley intended this as a deliberate statement, or whether it was just the natural result of building from the materials he had, the effect is the same. A cartoon about things that didn't fit anywhere, finding somewhere to be. There's one more production detail worth mentioning. The show was made in London at a Cartoon Network studio by a largely British creative team, with a French creator, set in a fictional American suburb. Teresa Gallagher, who voices Nicole throughout the original run, is British and does a convincing American accent that lets her native voice through occasionally. The writing comes from people observing American suburban life from a certain distance, which gives Elmore a faint foreignness. The details are right, the archetypes are in place, but there's something slightly off about it all, a sense that the people who built this world were looking at it from outside and finding it a bit funnier and stranger than a native perspective might. This is, again, consistent with the rest of the show. The early seasons are a bit rougher than what the show became later. The visual style hadn't fully settled, the character dynamics were being worked out. But even in season 1, the ambition was there. The way Elmore looked was unlike most other animated shows, and that visual approach is worth its own section. And alongside all of this, the Wattersons are broke. This is there from episode 1 and never goes away. The house needs maintenance. Richard has been out of work for years. Nicole's salary is carrying everything. The show makes comedy of this, but The detail is there, running underneath all of it. A child watching in 2012 sees a funny family in funny situations. An adult rewatching in 2024 sees a household running on one income, with a partner not contributing, and a maintenance situation that suggests the property is in genuine decline. Both are watching the same show. The service is comedy. The other thing is just there, for whoever looks. There's also something worth saying about what the show was going to Cartoon Network at that particular moment in its history. The early 2000s was a period when the network was producing several shows that leaned hard into visual experimentation and tonal ambiguity. Regular Show had just started. Adventure Time was building momentum. Gravity Falls was coming. These were shows that were doing something different from the Saturday morning cartoon model, and they were finding large audiences. Gumball arrived in that wave, and it fit into it, but it was also doing things none of the other shows were doing in quite the same way. The mixed visual style, which gets its own section shortly, was the most visible difference, but the other difference was the setting. Most of the other experimental cartoons of that period were set in explicitly unusual or fantastical environments. Regular Show took place at a park, but the park had a regular influx of surreal events. Adventure Time was set after an apocalypse in a world of magic and monsters. Gumball was set in a suburb, an ordinary, slightly run-down American suburb, where the houses had cracks in the walls and the supermarket had a loyalty card scheme. The strangeness was in the inhabitants and in the show's approach to depicting them, not in the premise. This made the comedy work differently. The unusual things in Gumball were unusual against a backdrop of recognizable, mundane reality. The photographed backgrounds of real locations contributed to this. The Wattersons are poor in a real way. They shop at a real supermarket with real price concerns. The comedy of putting a goldfish with legs and a blue cat and a piece of toast into that environment is the comedy of the truly strange existing in the genuinely ordinary, rather than the truly strange existing in a world that's already extraordinary. It's a small distinction, but it produces a different effect. The show's absurdism had somewhere specific to land. Most animated shows decide on a visual language and commit to it. You can identify a Hanna-Barbera show from across a room. Disney has a look. Pixar has a look. Even shows that are stylistically distinctive tend to be consistently stylistically distinctive. Gumball decided, fairly early on, not to do any of that. The core thing, the thing you notice immediately, is the backgrounds. They're photographs, real locations, mostly shot in the United Kingdom by the production team and then processed slightly, but recognizably real. Streets, parks, interiors, shops, actual places. And in these photograph environments, 2D animated characters walk around. Not cartoon backgrounds, photographs. And alongside the 2D characters, there are 3D CGI characters with a different visual quality from the 2D ones, and characters who appear to be made of clay or fabric, and puppet-style figures, and, now and then, live-action humans who just appear in scenes and interact with everyone else without any explanation. By the logic of how animation normally works, this should not cohere. The mix of styles sounds like what happens when a production runs out of money and can't maintain consistency. But Gumball committed to it deliberately from the first episode, and it became part of what the show was. Not an accident or a limitation, a decision. Bockelay has talked about being influenced by Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the 1988 film in which animated characters exist in the same physical world as live-action footage. He wanted something of that quality, characters that felt genuinely present in actual locations. In one interview, he mentioned wanting children to believe that Elmore was a real place they could visit. Whether any child actually believed this is hard to say, but the visual approach creates something distinctive. Elmore feels like a different kind of world, one not following the usual rules of how animated places look. And it solved a problem, because if you've already committed to the idea that your show can contain multiple animation styles simultaneously, you can use that as a storytelling tool. When you need a scene to feel like a manga panel, it can. When you need a fight sequence to look like a high-budget anime production, it can do that too. The show never locked itself into a visual grammar that later choices would violate, because there was no singular grammar to violate. The Fury, which we'll spend time on in the Nicole section, has an extended fight sequence animated by Studio 4 Degrees Celsius, a Japanese studio known for technically demanding, visually spectacular work. Bockley has said he originally wanted Studio Trigger for the sequence, but they were committed to other projects. What Studio 4 Degrees Celsius delivered sits in the middle of a Gumball episode and looks completely different from anything around it. Detailed, expressive, the characters moving with a weight and energy that the show's usual style doesn't reach for. And it works without friction because the show had always looked like multiple things at once. The most interesting use of the visual approach, and the one that I think about most, is what happens in an episode called The Money. The Wattersons run out of money. Their financial situation deteriorates, and as it does, the show's animation quality degrades alongside it. The backgrounds lose detail, the character models simplify, the colour palette reduces. At the bottom of the crisis, everyone is rendered in something that looks like a rough production storyboard, barely animated, barely coloured. And then they sign a contract, the finances stabilise, and the animation snaps back to normal. The joke is obvious, but what's actually happening is the show treating its own production budget as a literal fact within the story. The quality of the programme is tied to the family's finances because, in the show's internal logic, the family and the show are the same thing. Their wealth and the show's production value are expressions of the same variable. This is the kind of thing that changes how you watch the rest of the show once you've seen it. You become aware that the show is aware of itself. The money could only exist in a show that had already established a flexible relationship with visual consistency. A show that had committed to one style couldn't have made that episode. The mixed reality approach, decided on in Season 1 for purely aesthetic reasons, turned out to enable this much later. The real-world backgrounds, mostly photographed in the UK, contribute a specific texture to Elmore. There are streets in those backgrounds that don't quite look like American streets. There's a European quality to some of the exterior locations, something in the architecture and the light. It's subtle. Most viewers don't consciously register it, but it adds to the overall quality of Elmore as a place that's almost America, almost ordinary, but not quite. A fictional suburb that was photographed somewhere else and moved. The show went through visual changes across the full original run. Season 1 is rougher. The character designs shifted between 1 and 2, becoming more defined. By Seasons 3 and 4, the animation was more fluid, and the visual ambition was higher. Fans have their preferred eras. Seasons 2 through 4 tend to come up most often as the sweet spot. But even the earliest episodes had the mixed reality foundation in place, and that foundation is what made the later seasons possible. One more thing about the sound, which doesn't get mentioned as often as it should. The show used a full orchestral score, which is slightly unusual for a children's Cartoon Network show of its production scale. The music adjusts to whatever the visuals are doing. When the show goes anime style, the music responds. When it's in its most absurdist mode, the music meets it there. This is part of how a show that changes its visual identity episode by episode manages to feel like one coherent thing. The music holds the register when the images shift. There is a particular pleasure in watching Gumball carefully once you know to look for it. Not because there are hidden things in every frame, though sometimes there are, but because the show is always making choices about how things look, and those choices are never accidental. And following the logic of them is a pleasant thing to do when you have a quiet evening and nothing that needs doing. A few individual episodes are worth mentioning here as illustrations of the visual approach doing something specific. The Sweaters, an episode that parodies the aesthetics and narrative conventions of tennis anime, shifts the show's visual register completely for extended stretches, adopting the dramatic angles and expressive character animation of that genre to depict a junior tennis competition. It's funny precisely because the style carries full commitment. The show doesn't wink at its own parody. It goes to the place and stays there. The Matchmaker, The Void, and several other episodes use different stylistic registers within single episodes to shift tone rather than simply for jokes. The Void itself, as a visual space of TV static, is doing a lot of work beyond just looking distinctive. The static is a choice, not a placeholder. It communicates something about what the void is and how the show understands it. There is also the matter of what the show looked like on original broadcast compared to rewatches or streaming now. The 4:3 aspect ratio of the early episodes, the specific quality of the photograph backgrounds at that resolution, the animation at the original frame rate, all of this is part of the texture of the show as it originally existed. Streaming platforms have occasionally shown the episodes in different formats, and the original broadcast quality is part of what the show was. The visual world of Elmore was built to exist in that specific format. The practical challenge of getting characters to feel present within photograph backgrounds, rather than pasted on top of them, was one the production team solved by paying close attention to how light behaved in the photographs and matching the characters' shading and shadow accordingly. It's not perfect in every frame. In earlier episodes especially, there are moments where the composite is more visible, but the goal was coherence, and it got closer to that goal as the production refined its methods. The show looked the way it did because of a decision made before a single episode aired, and that decision shaped every creative choice that followed it. Television shows have background characters who appear in classroom scenes, walk down streets, exist in the world without ever doing anything particularly significant. Most shows don't think about this. The background characters are wallpaper. They appear and disappear, and nobody registers the difference, Gumball noticed. Molly Collins was a grey sauropod dinosaur, one of the students at Elmore Junior High. She appeared in Season 1 in a handful of scenes, had a small role in an episode called The Pressure, and then stopped appearing. Between that episode and Season 3, she was simply absent. No explanation, no mention. If you were watching the show in order and paying close attention, you'd eventually notice she was gone, but you'd probably assume it was normal background character rotation. The kind of thing animated shows do without comment and move on. The 12th episode of Season 3 is called The Void. Gumball and Darwin, starting from a small observation that eventually escalates in the way things escalate in Elmore, end up investigating where Molly went. Mr. Small, their teacher, gets involved, and they find something. There is a dimension beyond Elmore's perceived reality. It looks like TV static, an infinite expanse of grey and white noise, with fragments of things half visible within it. Objects, locations, people, things that were once part of Elmore and are now somewhere else entirely. The world the episode establishes is sentient in some functional sense, or at least it operates as if it is. It is capable of removing things it considers mistakes. Characters who aren't serving a purpose, who aren't interesting enough, who don't fit. The world takes them and places them in the void, where they exist in a kind of suspended absence, and everyone else gradually stops remembering them. The void also affects memory directly. The forgetting is part of the mechanism. It doesn't just remove things, it covers the removal. Molly was, by the world's assessment, boring. Not malicious, not wrong, not harmful in any way, just boring. in a way that made her surplus to requirements. So she was taken. They rescue her. They find the dimension, find her treehouse preserved inside it, escape with her through a closing portal. And then, before they can tell anyone what they've seen, the void takes back the memory. Their tinfoil hats, which had been protecting their minds, get sucked back into the closing portal. They forget everything. They stand in the school corridor looking faintly confused, and the episode ends and Molly's back, and no one knows what just happened. The TV static visual is the detail I keep coming back to. TV static is what you see when a channel stops broadcasting, when a signal goes out, when there's nothing there anymore. The void looks like TV static because it is, in the show's terms, a place where content goes when it has been removed from broadcast, the things the world decided not to continue with. And Gumball is a show, and its world operates by a logic that rhymes with the logic of a show, and so its trash dimension looks like what a television looks like when there's nothing to watch. There is also a detail in the episode that most people missed on first viewing. While Gumball and Darwin are racing to find Molly and escape, another character is visible in the background of the void. A blue single-eyed figure. He appears to be calling out to them. He doesn't get a line. He doesn't get a reaction. Gumball and Darwin run straight past him because they didn't come for him and because he's exactly the kind of person you run past. His name is Rob. He'll have his own section shortly. But in this episode, he's a plant, a background detail placed there for the audience to miss, which almost everyone did, which is entirely appropriate given what he's doing in the void and why he ended up there. What the episode establishes, beyond the specific story of Molly, is that the world of Elmore is not a passive environment. It makes decisions. It removes things. It protects itself from scrutiny by erasing the memory of anyone who finds out what it's doing. And it establishes something with real weight. Relevance in this world is a condition of existence. If you're not doing something the world finds worthwhile, you can be erased, not killed. Erased, which is a different thing, and in some ways, a worse one. Also, and I can't quite move past this, the episode tells us that Molly was sent to the void for being boring. Not cruel, not destructive, not wrong in any way, just not interesting enough to keep around. There's something about that which lingers. The void being made of TV static is doing a specific kind of work. A reading of the void that maps it onto the animation industry is not difficult to arrive at. Shows get cancelled, characters get written out, ideas get shelved. The void is what that looks like from the inside, from the perspective of the character who got written out. The TV static is the channel going dark, and the characters there are the ones nobody came back for. This fits with the show's broader tendency to treat its own existence as a cartoon, as valid subject matter for its stories. A show built from rejected characters, which then spent several seasons developing a mythology about what happens to rejected characters within the world of the show, was doing something consistent. The same idea at different scales. The void isn't resolved in season 3. It doesn't get a clean ending or a contained explanation. It becomes the show's central ongoing threat, building across seasons 4, 5 and 6 toward a finale that left significant things unresolved. We'll come back to that. For now, the relevant thing is that a children's cartoon introduced in its 3rd season, a realm whose function is to erase things nobody finds interesting anymore. And it positioned this as the most frightening thing in its world. The void is not a monster. It's not a villain with a personality or a motive you can negotiate with. It's a system. The thing that animates it is, essentially, indifference, which is a strange thing to put at the centre of a cartoon, and probably one of the reasons the show stays with people the way it does. There are other background characters who quietly disappeared before the void made the disappearances meaningful. The show's earlier seasons had a rotating cast of students who appeared in classroom shots and then stopped appearing. Most of these were simply the normal attrition of a large cast with many incidental characters. But the Void episode changed how you read those absences retroactively. Once you know the world removes its mistakes, you start looking differently at characters who were there and then weren't. This is one of the things the show did particularly well, changing how you understand earlier material by what it established later. The Pony, the Season 2 episode where Rob gets knocked into a manhole and nobody notices, is a comedy episode the first time you watch it. After the Void arc develops across Seasons 3 and 4, it reads as a villain origin story. The same footage, the same content, different meaning. This happens several times across the show's run. Earlier material was not written specifically to be reread, but the show's later developments were careful enough about consistency that rereading tends to hold up. There's a practical animation question underneath the Void's existence that's worth noting. Background characters in animated shows are expensive to design in any detail if you intend to use them consistently. The general approach is to have a library of designs that rotate through crowd scenes, with occasional, specific background characters getting more defined roles. Gumball had an unusually large cast of reasonably distinct background characters for a show of its scale, which made those disappearances legible in a way they might not have been in a show with more generic backgrounds. Molly Collins, specifically, had been designed with enough distinctiveness to be recognisable, which meant her absence was something an attentive viewer could actually notice, which meant the show could build an episode around investigating where she went. The Void myth worked because the groundwork for it, however unintentional, was already in the show's visual design. Before the Void episode, Rob was a background character at Elmore Junior High. He appeared in shots. He sat in classrooms. He existed in the background without having done anything notable. He was one of the Blue Cyclops students who populated the school without ever having a significant role in any episode. His first moment of genuine screen presence is in a Season 2 episode called The Pony. He speaks. He interacts with Gumball and Darwin, and across the entire episode, Gumball and Darwin cannot correctly identify his name. They call him Ralph. They call him Richie. They try various approximations and never arrive at Rob. At one point, Darwin knocks him into a manhole. They continue their conversation without acknowledging this has happened. The episode ends. Rob is not mentioned again. The Pony functions as a gag, a character so forgettable that the main characters can't retain his name, even while standing in front of him. But the episode was also, it turned out, the beginning of a villain origin story. Because in The Void, when Gumball and Darwin were racing to save Molly, Rob was there. The world had decided he was irrelevant, removed him to the Void, and he had been there for some time. And when Gumball and Darwin arrived to save someone else, Rob saw them. He called out, he begged, they ran straight past him because they hadn't come for him. And because he was precisely the kind of person you run past. He escaped anyway. He grabbed onto Mr. Small's van as it left, and the portal closed around him as he came through. The closing portal damaged him. He emerged on the other side distorted, visually glitching, parts of him rendered in something that looked like corrupted video footage, like a file that had gone wrong during transfer. He also had amnesia for a while. The Nobody is the Season 3 episode that follows from The Void, though it comes later in the season. Someone has been living in the Wattersons' basement. Taking small things, it's Rob, who has no memory of who he is and has been existing in the basement in a kind of confused half-life, taking what he needed to survive and not knowing what else to do. The exchange at the end of this episode is the one that defines the whole arc. Gumball and Darwin encounter Rob and try to help him figure out what he is, what role he could have in the world. They go through options. Everything seems to be taken. All the good identities are occupied. And then someone suggests that the role of villain might be open. Elmore doesn't really have one, and Darwin and Gumball, genuinely trying to be helpful, suggest that Rob might be suited for being the bad guy. Rob agrees, and in the process of agreeing, his memories come back. He remembers the void. He remembers Gumball and Darwin running past him. He remembers calling out and not being heard. And he swears revenge because he has now been given a part to play in the world, and the part he's chosen is their enemy. Gumball and Darwin shrug and walk home. Rob's evolution, from that moment across seasons 4, 5 and 6, is one of the more interesting character arcs in the show. He keeps failing at being a villain, partly through incompetence and partly because he's not entirely sure he wants to be one. He's doing it because it gives him a role, not because causing harm is what he's after. In a season 4 episode called The Nemesis, Gumball and Darwin actually help Rob become a better villain, providing him with a nickname, a costume and a catchphrase. He accepts their help. He still hates them. He becomes a marginally more effective antagonist with his enemy's assistance. It's an extremely Gumball situation. The most significant Rob episodes are The Disaster and The Rerun, a two-parter in season 5. By this point, Rob has obtained a universal remote from the Awesome Store, a mysterious van that appears in Elmore, selling things to people who need them. The universal remote controls reality in the way a television remote controls a television. Pause, rewind, fast forward. Rob uses it to essentially rewrite events as he chooses, winning completely, taking everything from Gumball, and then he undoes it all because he can't go through with it. What the two-parter establishes, beyond the spectacle, is that Rob knows the world is fictional. He says it directly. He knows he's in a show. He knows there are people outside the show watching it. He operates on a level of awareness the rest of the cast doesn't share. And this came from the void. Whatever the void did to him when he passed through its closing portal, it left him able to see the world differently. This is an extremely reasonable villain origin story. A character was made invisible, then actively abandoned, then physically damaged in his attempt to escape. He came out the other side with a distorted body, gaps in his memory, and an awareness of being fictional that the people around him don't have and can't understand. He became a villain because it was the only available role, suggested to him by the people who abandoned him. And he's bad at it because he never wanted to be one. It's the kind of origin story you'd describe as well written in an adult drama about trauma and identity. It was in an animated show on Cartoon Network, built around a background character whose entire defining characteristic was that nobody could remember his name. In The Inquisition, the season 6 finale, Rob's true purpose becomes clear. His plan throughout his villain arc, the plan that looked like attacking Gumball and the people around him, was actually an attempt to save everyone. He had seen through Banana Barbara's prophetic paintings that the void was going to consume the world. His scheme was to turn all the residents of Elmore into humans, which he believed would let them escape into the real world before the cartoon reality was destroyed. He was trying to help. He just had no way to explain it that didn't look like villainy. It doesn't work. He's unmasked, his plan fails. The void opens beneath him anyway. He falls in. Ben Bockley said in a 2025 interview that the inspiration for Rob's whole story was the idea that being ignored, being made to feel you don't matter, being invisible to the people around you is one of the worst things you can do to someone. And that this, taken seriously, is a completely reasonable origin for someone who goes wrong. There was eventually a resolution. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball, the season 7 revival, contains an episode called The Rewrite that addressed Rob's fate. Bockley described it as a sweet episode that would give Rob justice, making up for the way the narrative had mistreated him. The details are better experienced than described, but the shape of it is a character who spent his whole arc being controlled by forces he didn't choose, being used and abandoned and ejected and damaged, finally getting something he chose rather than something that was done to him, which is the correct ending for Rob. It just took until 2025 to arrive. The awesome store is one of the show's recurring background elements that rewards attention. It's a van, or sometimes a shop, that appears in various forms at various points in the series, selling things that respond to narrative need. The universal remote is the most significant thing it provides, but it's not the only item with strange properties that comes from this source. The awesome store appears to exist outside the normal logic of Elmore, which is appropriate for an object that's eventually used to manipulate that logic. Rob's physical appearance after the void is worth spending a moment on. The visual glitching, the corrupted video footage quality to parts of his body is not just an aesthetic marker. It communicates what happened to him. He went through a portal that wasn't designed for exit. The portal closed around him, and he came through the gap. The corruption is physical evidence of the path he took. And it's also, visually, a constant reminder that he sees the world differently from everyone else. The thing that damaged him is the same thing that gave him his insight. His awareness of the show's fictional nature and his glitched appearance are the same event, expressed in two different registers. This is the kind of visual storytelling the show did well when it was operating at its best. The character design is the backstory. You can understand something important about what Rob has been through just from looking at him. Before he speaks, his voice too changed after the void. In his background character appearances, he was unremarkable. His voice in the episodes where he becomes significant has a slight edge to it. Not menacing exactly, more like someone who has been through something that changed the register they speak in. The performances across the Rob arc by the various voice actors who contributed to it are quietly good in a way the show doesn't always get credited for. Penny Fitzgerald appears in the very first episode of Gumball. She's a peanut-shaped creature with antlers. That's what she appears to be. The show establishes from the beginning that she and Gumball have an unspoken awareness of each other, the kind that precedes actual communication, and that Gumball is very aware of her. He says the wrong thing. He means well, and it doesn't translate. He's embarrassed around her in the specific way of someone who cares considerably, more than they're able to say. This goes on for 3 seasons. 3 seasons of almost something, of near conversations and interrupted moments, and the very specific comedy of 2 people who clearly like each other and cannot quite get there. Meanwhile, Penny exists inside her peanut shell throughout. The shell moves, it expresses. You can tell from it when she's happy or uncomfortable, but we don't see what's inside. The rest of the Fitzgerald family, including her parents, also wear shells. The show treats this as entirely normal. Nobody questions it. Season 4, Episode 6 is called The Shell. Gumball and Penny argue. It escalates. At the peak of the argument, her shell cracks, and then it breaks and falls away, and something comes out. She's a shapeshifter. Under the shell, she's a luminous, glowing creature that changes form according to her emotional state. She becomes a dragon. She becomes something monstrous. She becomes a small, delicate thing made of light. She takes the shape of whatever she's feeling, and she can't fully control it. Her father's reaction is immediate and horrified. He wants her back in the shell. He doesn't want her to be seen like this. The shell, it becomes clear, was not just an aesthetic detail. It was containment. It was protection. Whether from the world seeing her or from something in herself that he found frightening, the shell was designed to keep something inside. Bockelay confirmed in an interview that the episode was influenced by Spirited Away, the Miyazaki film in which characters transform into their truest selves when certain conditions are met. The episode has that quality. The transformation doesn't feel like a superpower reveal. It feels like something Penny has been holding back, and the argument was the catalyst that meant she couldn't hold it anymore. Gumball's response is the emotional core of the episode. He's afraid briefly when the monstrous forms appear, and then he isn't, and he tells her she's perfect. The reading of this episode, that the show doesn't state explicitly, but also doesn't prevent, is fairly clear. Penny has been concealing her true nature inside something she was expected to wear. When it comes off, the people around her react with alarm or hostility. Her father wants her covered up again, and the person she cares most about looks at what she actually is in all its difficult and shifting forms and says it's fine. She's fine. She's perfect. Whether you read that as a straightforward be yourself story, or as something more specifically about identities people hide for family or social reasons, the emotional mechanics work the same way. And the show doesn't insist on one interpretation. It just does what it does and lets you bring what you bring to it. The question that was never fully answered is, what exactly is Penny? The shape-shifting implies something older or more elemental than the show's otherwise fairly comprehensible character logic. Her whole family wearing shells suggests whatever she is runs in the family, but the show never explains what the Fitzgeralds are. They exist. They wear shells. Under the shells, apparently, are creatures of light. There are fan theories. One holds that the Fitzgeralds are magical or supernatural beings who adopted shells in order to fit into the mundane world of Elmore, which would make Penny's true form the original and the shell the disguise rather than the other way around. Others focus on the family's social dynamics, the shell as armour of a particular kind worn for particular reasons. None of this is confirmed. The show was comfortable with leaving things unexplained, which is one of its more distinctive qualities, and also one of the things that keeps people theorising. The shell is consistently cited as one of the best episodes in the series. It appears at or near the top of most fan rankings. Some episodes are funnier, some are more spectacular, but this one has a quality of mattering, a feeling like something actually changed, and the change was earned, and the show knew what it was doing. After the episode, Penny no longer stays in the shell for the most part. She shifts between forms depending on her mood. The relationship between her and Gumball becomes something more honest, which is generally what happens when someone stops pretending. And the show continues, and other things happen, and the episode sits in the middle of the season as the moment everything shifted. There's a follow-on story with her father, whose discomfort with her true form thaws very slowly across the later seasons. He never becomes an easy or comfortable character about it, but he comes around gradually and imperfectly, the way people sometimes do. The show doesn't resolve this cleanly either. Cleaning things up neatly was never really Gumball's style. The thing I find most interesting about the shell, thinking about it now, is that Penny remains somewhat mysterious even after everything. You understand her better at the end of the episode than at the beginning. You don't understand her completely, which is in a way the right result of a story about someone finally showing who they really are. You get closer, you don't get all the way there. That's usually how it works with people. Since we're on the topic of things the show was doing under the surface, the next section goes deeper into that. Because the Void and Rob's metafictional awareness weren't isolated experiments. They were part of something the show had been building across most of its run. The Fitzgerald family dynamics were explored in more depth in the seasons following The Shell, and they're worth noting as context for what the episode was doing. Penny's family is one of the more socially aspirational families in Elmore. Her father, Patrick Fitzgerald, is acutely concerned with status and appearances. The shells the whole family wears sit differently once you understand this about him. They're not just a species characteristic, they're consistent with who Patrick is as a person, someone for whom external presentation is very important and internal reality is something to be managed. The season 4 and 5 episodes that revisit the Fitzgerald family tend to use Penny and Patrick's relationship to explore what it costs to be the person who maintains appearances in a family, and what it costs the people around them. This isn't a heavy-handed exploration. The show does it through comedy, largely, but the substance is there. There's also a fan reading of the Fitzgerald family that connects them to the show's broader mythology. If the Fitzgeralds are supernatural beings wearing shells to pass as ordinary, they represent a specific relationship to the world of Elmore that's different from most other characters. Most of Elmore's inhabitants simply are what they are. The Fitzgeralds might be something that arrived and adapted. This would explain why Patrick is so concerned about the shells staying on. If the shells are what allows them to exist normally within Elmore's reality, removing them could have consequences beyond mere social embarrassment. This is a theory, not a confirmed element of the show's mythology, but it's the kind of theory that the shell supports without disproving, and it makes Patrick's reaction to Penny's transformation significantly darker than a straightforward reading offers. Whether it's right or not, the episode works without the theory. It works as a story about someone finally being seen, which is, in its way, the simplest and most durable story in the show's whole collection. Most animated shows treat their world as simply being real. The characters live somewhere, that somewhere exists, things happen in it. The fact that it's a cartoon is not a relevant fact within the show. It just is what it is. Gumball started doing something different from fairly early on, and the further it went, the more committed to it the show became. By the end of the original series, it had spent several seasons building a mythology around the idea that Elmore was not real in the ordinary sense, that it was being sustained by something, and that it could end. We've already covered the void, which is the foundational piece of this. The world removing things it considers mistakes implies the world has preferences and makes judgments. Something is maintaining Elmore according to some standard of what should exist there. From that foundation, the show kept adding. Rob, after his escape from the void, developed an awareness that the world is fictional. He says this explicitly in The Disaster. He knows he's in a show. He knows there are people outside the show watching it. He is, in the show's terms, a character who became aware that he is a character. This came from the void. Whatever damaged him physically in his escape also left him seeing the world differently from everyone else. The universal remote, which Rob obtains from the Awesome Store, is the clearest visual expression of this. It controls reality the way a television remote controls a television. You press pause, reality pauses. You press rewind, time goes backward. The device exists as an ordinary object within Elmore's world, but it's obviously a comment on what that world is. You can control it the way you control a broadcast, because it is a broadcast. The money established that the family's finances and the show's production quality are the same variable. The Signal has an episode where reality glitches and corrupts specifically around Gumball and Darwin, looking like damaged video footage. Various fan theories have pointed at Rob as a likely cause of the glitching, given that his post-void appearance is itself a persistent visual glitch. Banana Barbara, a recurring character with the ability to paint prophetic images of the future, starts producing paintings that show only TV static. The same static as the void, the future of Elmore in her paintings is disappearing. This begins in Season 5 and builds through Season 6. And then the Inquisition ends with the void consuming the school, Rob falling in, a freeze frame, and incomplete credit music, which is where the original series stopped. After the show ended, Ben Bockley addressed the simulation theory in interviews connected to the revival. A fan theory had been circulating for years, suggesting that Elmore was a simulated or fictional reality, and that the show was building toward a revelation about the nature of that world. Bockley confirmed that this theory would be addressed in the new material. He added, perhaps to manage expectations, that he wouldn't describe the answer as dark. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball. Season 7 addresses this in an episode called The Rewrite. The premise involves Gumball and Darwin being at risk of discovering a plot hole, a piece of evidence that would prove to them that their world is not real. The void threatens to destroy the universe if they make this discovery. Rob, in this episode, is working to prevent them from finding it, protecting them from a truth that would doom everyone around them. The full circle of his arc A character nobody noticed, protecting the people who abandoned him from a knowledge that would end their world. What the long arc toward this revelation demonstrates is that the show was thinking about what it wanted to say from fairly early in its run. The void in Season 3, the metafictional awareness developing in Season 4, the accumulating weight in Seasons 5 and 6 were all pointing somewhere specific. The destination was interrupted by the show ending before it arrived, and then eventually reached via a different route 6 years later. A children's show spending the better part of a decade setting up a question about the nature of fiction and the reality of its own world is an unusual thing. What's more unusual is that the show managed this without ever feeling heavy about it. The mythology was always in the background of comedy episodes, woven into the ordinary texture of the show. You could watch an episode about Gumball trying to return a library book and find somewhere in it a detail that connected back to the void, and then the comedy would continue. The two registers coexisted without either one announcing itself as more important. The meta-awareness also expressed itself more lightly in episodes that comment on tropes and narrative conventions. Characters becoming aware of genre expectations. Situations with a certain narrative, shaped that Gumball then breaks or follows ironically. The show found its own cliches funny and kept subverting them. This is different from what Rob does. When Rob says he knows he's in a show, it's distressing. It comes from a place of genuine dislocation. He escaped the place the world erases things to, and it left him seeing something the rest of the cast can't see. His awareness is a symptom, not a narrative device. The show held both of these simultaneously. Light metafiction in the comedy episodes, genuine existential weight in the Rob arc. Neither one undermined the other, which is harder to maintain than it sounds. One thing I keep thinking about, looking back at the show, the metafictional insight, the ability to see the world as what it actually is, belongs to Rob. Not to Gumball, who is the centre of the story. Not to any obviously important or cool character. It belongs to the glitching Cyclops who used to be a background extra and who escaped the trash dimension by grabbing onto a van. The show gave its clearest sight to the person who had the least reason to feel good about what he could see. That's not a coincidence. That's the show knowing what it was doing. The Awesome Store, which we mentioned in the Rob section in the context of the Universal Remote, is part of this same metafictional layer. It appears throughout the show, selling things that narratives require. It exists outside normal commerce because it exists outside normal logic. It knows what the story needs and provides it. This is not usually stated, but it's consistent across the show's use of the device. The store is another expression of the show's awareness of itself as a constructed thing. The Disaster and the Rerun, the two-parter, where Rob uses the Universal Remote most extensively, are worth re-watching specifically for the show's use of the remote's pause function. When Rob pauses reality, the characters freeze, but the freeze is depicted differently than a conventional frozen image. Gumball is able to perceive the pause and move through it. There's a visual language for what it feels like to be inside paused time that the show develops specifically for this episode. The production team apparently put considerable thought into how to show a moment that has been paused from the inside. The result is one of the most visually distinctive sequences in the original run. The simulation theory, as fan theories go, is one of the more tidy ones. It explains the void, it explains Rob's awareness, it explains why the Universal Remote works, it explains why the money episode can happen. All of these things are consistent with the world being a managed fiction that someone or something is maintaining. They're also all consistent with a show that was simply interested in playing with the conventions of animation and children's television. What Boccale's confirmation did was close one of those readings and leave the other standing. The world of Elmore has a fictional nature that will be addressed. It is not dark. That's the confirmation, the exact nature of it, how the characters relate to the knowledge, what it means for them. That's what the new material answers. Whether the answer satisfies the people who spent 6 years theorising about it, is a personal variable. But the question was always the right one to be asking. Nicole Watterson is the mother of the family. She works at the Rainbow Factory. She has 3 children, one of whom was originally a goldfish. She's married to Richard, who hasn't held a job in years. She manages the household, does most of the parenting, keeps the family functioning in the way only one person in the family is capable of doing. In season 1, she's fairly normal. Intense, capable, clearly the competent adult in a household that would immediately collapse without her. She can run very fast when she needs to, and she's clearly formidable when someone gets in her way, but she's within the range of what you might call a person under significant stress. By season 4, she can generate energy shields with her hands and punch the ground hard enough to produce an earthquake. The escalation is gradual enough that you can miss it if you're watching casually. She defeats a Tyrannosaurus Rex in a fight at some point, and it reads as a running joke about how intimidating she is. She does something physically impossible in the background of a scene, and it's played as a quick gag. The accumulation of these moments across several seasons builds a picture that becomes impossible to ignore. Nicole Watterson is extraordinarily powerful, and the show treats this as entirely unremarkable and keeps moving. Season 4's episode, The Fury, is the one that addressed all of this properly. Yuki Yoshida arrives in Elmore. She's Masami's mother, a tall, austere woman who appears to have been waiting for this moment for quite some time. She challenges Nicole to a fight. Nicole refuses to engage, and Yuki spends the rest of the episode making Nicole's life specifically terrible in order to force the confrontation. She damages Nicole's car. She spray paints the word coward on the side of it. She flirts with Richard. She threatens Nicole's job and then her house. Nicole eventually agrees to the fight. The episode then shows, in a sequence animated by Studio 4 Degrees Celsius in a detailed, expressive anime style, what these two people were when they were young. They were prodigies, childhood best friends who trained together under Yuki's father, who was apparently a martial arts instructor of unusual severity. They were the best, and then they were put against each other in a final tournament, and Nicole won through sheer unwillingness to give up, and Yuki never recovered from it. After the tournament, Nicole stopped training. She got married, had children, took a job at the Rainbow Factory. She hasn't trained in decades. Yuki spent those same decades doing the opposite. She dedicated herself entirely to getting better, specifically with the aim of one day rematching Nicole and winning. By any objective measure, she is a more skilled and better prepared fighter than Nicole could possibly be after years without practice. They fight. Nicole wins more easily than she did when they were children. When Yuki asks how this is possible, Nicole says, "I have been through the most grueling training on the planet, and then raising 3 kids and 1 husband," which is the joke, but the show plays it straight. The implication is real. Managing the Watterson household, being the only functional adult in a family of people who require constant intervention, has developed Nicole in ways that decades of focused training could not match. The adversity is different in kind, and the adaptation it produced is more useful than what formal training would have built. Beausoleil named Nicole after his own mother, whom he described as his kick-ass mum. The character was designed from the start to be genuinely formidable. What the show did across the original run was take the concept of the stressed, overextended working mother and follow it to its logical extreme. If the demands of keeping a family together really do develop certain capacities, what if you took that completely seriously? There is an episode called The Choices that shows Nicole's life branching at various decision points, mapping what different versions of her life might have looked like. One path, the one where she didn't meet Richard, ends with her winning an international martial arts tournament, then graduating with distinction, then becoming extremely wealthy, then becoming mayor of Elmore, and then eventually a world ruler. The episode frames this as the logical culmination of Nicole's trajectory without the family as a variable. It's played for comedy. The detail is still there. The fight sequence in The Fury was guest animated by a studio 4 degrees Celsius. Bockley said in an interview he originally wanted Studio Trigger for the sequence, a studio known for a particularly energetic and visually intense animation style, but they were committed to other projects. What 4 degrees Celsius delivered is the most technically ambitious piece of animation in the show's original run. It sits in the middle of an otherwise ordinary episode of Gumball and looks completely different from anything around it. Characters move with weight, impacts carry physical consequence, and then the sequence ends and the show returns to normal without comment. Yuki returned in The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, the Season 7 revival. Bockley mentioned ahead of the new series that he wanted to continue exploring her relationship with Nicole, noting it was one that fans didn't discuss as much as some of the show's other dynamics, but which had a lot still in it, which suggests the Nicole and Yuki story had more planned for it than one memorable episode. The image the show ultimately produces of Nicole is of a person who is, objectively, one of the most capable beings in her world, spending that capacity on school runs and arguments about the household budget and figuring out what to do when Richard has accidentally started another crisis. Both things are completely true simultaneously. The extraordinary capacity and the mundane application of it. The show holds this without contradiction and without asking you to find it sad. It's just what her life is, which is, if you think about it, a fairly accurate portrait of quite a lot of people. The fan discussions about Nicole's power level are entertainingly serious when they come up online. She's generally placed in fan power rankings of the show's characters, above everyone else by a significant margin. The Void itself, the show's central existential threat across several seasons, is characterized by the show as something the characters can't fight directly. Nicole, fan consensus tends to note, is the one character who might actually have a case. This is never stated. It doesn't need to be. The Fury is not the only episode that develops Nicole's history and establishes her as someone with a more complex past than her role as the mum implies. There are episodes across seasons 4 and 5 that touch on her relationship with her own parents, who are difficult people in specific ways that illuminate why Nicole became the person she is. Her father is a demanding and exacting figure. Her mother is, in a different way, equally difficult. Nicole's competence and her exhaustion are both things she built from a specific context, not things she arrived with. The show positions Nicole as someone who has been managing difficult people since childhood and became extraordinarily capable as a result, which maps neatly onto her adult life, managing Richard and 3 children. The capacity and the situation are matched to each other. She's where she is because of what she had to be when she was young, and she's still doing it, but at a higher level of difficulty. There is also a running thread across the show's later seasons around Nicole beginning to reclaim some space for herself, her own interests and ambitions existing alongside her family role. This is never the main story of any episode, but it's in the background of several. She wins a competition. She beats Yuki. She occasionally does something that's for her rather than for the family. The show doesn't abandon the exhausted mum portrait, but it adds to it. Teresa Gallagher's performance across the original run is one of the consistent pleasures of the show's audio, even when the episodes are thinner. The character requires range, and she delivered it. The tradition of animated children's television, including content that goes over children's heads, is as old as animated children's television. Looney Tunes was doing it in the 1940s. The Animaniacs had material that had no real business being in a children's show. Regular Show, which ran on the same network as Gumball at almost exactly the same time, built its entire identity around adult sensibilities dressed in a children's cartoon format. Gumball was fairly deliberate about this. Not in a way that felt like it was trying to sneak things past censors, but in a way that treated adult viewers as a legitimate part of the audience and gave them material alongside the material aimed at children. The layering tended to be clean. You could watch the show as a child and receive the comedy. You could watch it as an adult and find a second version of many scenes reading quite differently. The most consistent example is the Wattersons' financial situation. This is not subtext. The family is broke. The house needs maintenance they can't afford. Richard hasn't worked in years. Nicole's salary carries everything. The show makes comedy of this throughout, but the comedy has a different register depending on how old you are. A child watching in 2012 sees a funny family in funny situations caused by not having money. An adult watching in 2022 sees a household running on one income with a non-contributing partner, with children who largely manage themselves, in a property that appears to be in genuine decline. Both are the same show. The comedy is identical. The additional layer the adult reading brings doesn't come from the show hiding anything. It comes from the adult bringing more context to the same material. There is a recurring character called Larry Needlemeyer, who works every job in Elmore simultaneously. He's the checkout clerk at the supermarket, the employee at the fast food restaurant, the petrol station attendant, the parking warden, and several other things. The joke is that Larry is everywhere. In Season 5, an episode called The Laziest builds around Larry deciding whether to quit all his jobs. Early in the episode, Larry explains his situation. He holds every job because Elmore's economy requires it. Without him filling every service role simultaneously, the town's economy would cease to function. He is, in a straightforward reading, a one-person labour market performing the work a functioning town requires. The episode is a comedy. What it's describing is fairly specific. The Copycats is the episode that tends to come up when people discuss the show's more pointed content. It appears in Season 5. A Chinese animated show called Amazing World of Chi-Chi has appeared, which is a direct copy of Gumball. The Chi-Chi family is an obvious thinly built version of the Wattersons. Everything about them is slightly wrong. The episode is about what it feels like to be plagiarized, but it's also a fairly direct commentary on the practice of copying Western animated content, which was a real and well-documented phenomenon in Chinese entertainment at the time. The show doesn't hedge about this. It names what it's referencing. It's a children's cartoon taking a direct position on an industry issue. Fan response was divided. Some found it funny and sharp. Others felt it was punching in a direction that was less comfortable than the show usually went, with a less nuanced framing than something that specific probably warranted. It's one of the more debated episodes in the Gumball catalogue, specifically because it's unusual for a children's show to stake a clear position on something geopolitically adjacent. The show also handled emotional weight in ways that slipped past the comedy without always being flagged as significant. Darwin's good nature is usually played for laughs, but occasionally the show let him express a kind of distress that the comedy didn't fully contain. There are episodes where his relationship with Gumball goes wrong in ways that feel more complicated and more painful than the format usually acknowledges. The Dream is the episode that divides fans most on this, because Gumball's behaviour in it is bad enough that calling it a comedy becomes an act of will. Re-watching as an adult, or watching for the first time as an adult, the thing that tends to stand out is the energy behind the comedy. A lot of children's animation is energetic in a circular way, where things happen and then reset and the next episode begins fresh. Gumball had that surface structure. It also had something underneath it that was accumulating. The void mythology was accumulating. The character histories were building. Certain episodes were getting noticeably darker. The show also had an unusual relationship with failure. Most children's television has failures that resolve. The character tries, doesn't succeed, tries again, learns something. In Gumball, failures often just sit there. Characters have ambitions that don't pan out, and the show moves on without insisting growth occurred. The Wattersons fail at things regularly, sometimes hilariously, sometimes just flatly. The flatness is something adult viewers tend to appreciate more than younger ones. Music is worth mentioning here too, since it doesn't come up often enough. The show produced original songs for specific episodes, written and performed as if they were genuine pieces of music rather than comedic interjections. Several of these are well regarded as actual songs, not just as cartoon moments. The musical episodes tend to be among the more ambitious in each season, using the format to do character work that straight dialogue couldn't carry as well. The adult humour, the emotional weight, the musical ambition, the meta-commentary, the void mythology, any one of these would have been notable on its own. Gumball ran all of them simultaneously, in varying proportions, and made it feel like a coherent single show. That's the particular skill of it. Not any one element, but the way everything coexisted without the different registers undermining each other. One of the recurring pleasures of rewatching is finding the things the show planted that you absolutely were not paying attention to the first time. There's a background character called Idaho who is a potato, who appears in crowd scenes across several seasons and occasionally has a brief reaction to events. There's a recurring bit where characters appear to have extremely specific and unremarkable life circumstances that are treated as normal. Elmore's background population is populated with decisions the show made and committed to and never drew attention to. The show's relationship with romantic content is another thing that reads differently at different ages. Gumball and Penny's relationship across the first 3 seasons is played as comedy, but the comedy is not condescending about what it depicts. The awkwardness is real. The stakes for a 12-year-old are treated as real. An adult viewer understands this is comedy. The show also respects within the comedy that for the characters, it's not. This is a kind of generosity toward child experience that children's television doesn't always manage. Darwin's role in the show is worth dwelling on in this context. He's positioned as the emotionally intelligent one, the character who functions most clearly as a moral compass in a family that often doesn't have one easily accessible. This role puts him in contact with the difficult content more often than the other characters. He's the one who notices when something is wrong. He's the one who objects. And he's the one who, when his relationship with Gumball goes badly, is most visibly hurt by it. The show's darker emotional material tends to flow through Darwin, which gives him a different kind of weight from his surface presentation as the cheerful, friendly goldfish. Whether any of this was a deliberate structural decision or an emergent property of how his character developed across the seasons isn't something Bocculé has confirmed. It's in the show either way. On 6 September 2016, Ben Bocculé announced on social media that he would be leaving the Amazing World of Gumball after the completion of Season 6. Production would continue without him. The show was not ending, he was just stepping away. This generated fan concern, which was reasonable. Bocculé had been the show's driving creative voice from the beginning. The show continuing without him raised obvious questions about what it would be. But it also wasn't an ending. Production would go on. There would be more Gumball. Then on 7 October 2018, he retweeted an article stating that Season 6 would be the final season. The show was ending. This was then complicated by a follow-up from the same article's author, indicating that more seasons might still be possible, which meant the situation became a period of genuine uncertainty that lasted until the show was done. The communications around the ending were unclear enough that many fans didn't know whether the show had ended until there were simply no more episodes coming. The Inquisition aired in June 2019. It was the 44th and final episode of Season 6 and the 240th and final episode of the original series. It was not promoted as the series finale. Many people watching didn't know they were watching the last episode of the show. The episode's premise: a mysterious Superintendent Evil arrives at Elmore Junior High and begins stripping the students of their cartoon natures, converting them to ordinary humans. Terry's face is erased. Alan is given a body. The school is being systematically dismantled. Gumball and Darwin resist. They discover that Superintendent Evil is Rob in disguise. They fight back. Everyone is restored. Rob is unmasked, and then Rob's true intention becomes clear. He was trying to save everyone from the void which he had known was coming. His plan was to convert everyone to human form so they could escape into the real world before the cartoon reality was destroyed. He was trying to help. He couldn't explain it in a way that didn't look like villainy, so it looked like villainy. It doesn't work. He's unmasked, his plan has failed, everyone is restored. And then late at night, in the school building, Rob wakes up alone. The ground beneath him shakes, breaks open. The void is there, starting to consume the school. Rob falls. The shot freezes on Rob, mid-fall, against the static of the void. The end credits music begins, but it's incomplete. It sounds interrupted, like a piece of music cut off before it can resolve. And the episode ends. That was the series finale of The Amazing World of Gumball. Fan response was mixed in a way that mixed genuinely doesn't capture. A large portion of the fan base felt cheated. The show had spent several seasons building towards something, and the finale didn't resolve it. The void threat remained. Rob's fate was unclear. The show ended mid-sentence. Bockley subsequently said in various statements that the show was not meant to end on a cliffhanger. The original plan had a different conclusion. He agreed with the fans who were dissatisfied. In February 2021, he announced he was working on a film to resolve the cliffhanger. The Amazing World of Gumball, the movie. In September 2021, HBO Max announced they had greenlit it. In August 2022, HBO Max cancelled it. The streaming service had gone under new management, and a significant number of animated projects were dropped as part of a wider reorganisation. The Gumball film was among them. What happened instead was The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, a new series that premiered on Hulu in 2025. Bockley and a new creative team, including showrunner Matt Lazel and series director Eric Fountain, took the storylines that had been planned for the film and wove them into the new series. The Rewrite, the episode that addresses Rob's fate and the void, is the material that was always going to be the movie's resolution, finding a different form. Bockley described the revival in an interview as like being given CPR. "You have no sense of how much time lapsed," he said, which is either about the production experience or an accurate description of how the fanbase felt across the 6 years between the Inquisition and the Season 7 premiere. Probably both. There is something fitting about the Gumball finale being unsatisfying and the story of its continuation being chaotic. A show built from rejected characters, produced in unusual circumstances, that spent years suggesting its own world was unstable and might end at any moment. An ending that didn't quite happen, followed by a film that was cancelled, followed by a revival under a slightly different name on a different platform 6 years later. This is the kind of trajectory that matches the show's character, even if none of it was planned. The gap between the Inquisition and the revival was filled for the fan base by exactly the kind of sustained engagement that fandom produces in the absence of new material. Fan theories accumulated, rewatches deepened. The show was more present in online communities in 2022 than it had been in 2018, because unresolved stories are generative in ways that completed ones sometimes aren't. Not knowing what happened next gave people something to work with. The cancelled film had its own brief interesting history. The lead writer announced for it was Shane Mack, best known for writing adult comedies. The combination of Shane Mack and a Gumball film is a specific kind of amusing, given the show's history of adult content woven into its children's format. What that film would have looked like is now unknowable. Whatever was planned for it was apparently absorbed into the season 7 material instead. Gumball keeps coming back, which for a show about things that almost got erased seems right. The incomplete credit music in The Inquisition is a specific detail that a lot of people who watch the finale talk about. The end credits of a television episode use music to signal closure. It's a cue the audience responds to on a level below active thought. The music starts, the episode is done, the experience is complete. The music in The Inquisition starts, but it doesn't complete. It stops before it should. This is not a production error. The incomplete music was a choice, and it's one of the more effective things the finale does. However unsatisfying the finale ultimately is as a resolution. The show uses the credits themselves to communicate that something is unfinished. It was also, depending on your relationship with the show, an extremely frustrating choice. The audience's appetite for a resolution persisted through the years of silence and through the film's cancellation, which is a testament to how well constructed the unresolved elements were. The void threat and Rob's fate were not loose ends that felt like oversights. They felt like setups waiting for payoffs. This kept people engaged with the show even when there was no new material to engage with, and it's probably part of why the revival was able to find an audience 6 years later. The audience had been waiting for specific things, and the revival could offer to deliver them. Whether the revival delivered on the expectations 6 years of theorizing had built is something each viewer has a personal relationship with. Expectations that have been 6 years in development tend to be elaborate and specific. The season 7 episodes had real things they were addressing, and a finite amount of time to address them in. Not everyone finds the resolution they were hoping for. Some people find it, and more. This is the nature of long-deferred conclusions. The show also introduced new characters and dynamics in Season 7 that weren't directly related to the unresolved threads, which is something continuations tend to do, and which some audiences welcome and others find diluting. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball appears to be building toward its own ongoing mythology, not just tying up the original's loose ends. So the story continues, it's still going, and the void is still, presumably, somewhere in the static, patient as ever. One of the practical complications of using real children to voice cartoon children is that children age. Their voices change. They go through puberty. They become people who are no longer children. And the characters they voice don't do any of this because the show doesn't age in real time. And Gumball is written to be 12 years old and stays 12 years old. Most animated shows that use child voice actors eventually switch to adult actors who can do a child-sounding voice reliably without the biological complications. Gumball committed to real children throughout its original run, dealt with the complications by making them part of the show, and produced a situation that is now a small and fairly interesting piece of television history. Logan Grove was the first voice of Gumball. He started the role at around 12, voiced the character across seasons 1 and 2, and went through puberty during the production of season 2, which began to show in the recordings. Kwesi Bulky voiced Darwin across the same period and experienced the same thing. Ben Bokele chose to address this within the show. Season 3 opens with an episode called The Kids, in which Gumball and Darwin explicitly deal with their changing voices. The episode is about growing up, about what it means to hold on to something as it changes, about the particular relationship between childhood and the things that mark it. Logan Grove and Kwesi Bulky, the actual voice actors, perform it while their voices are actively breaking. The show names what's happening and puts it directly in front of the audience, and then the universe resets. At the end of the episode, something restores Gumball and Darwin to younger-sounding voices. New voice actors, Jacob Hopkins and Terrell Ransom Jr., take over. They sound like the characters from earlier in the show. The practical problem was acknowledged, built into the fiction of the show, and solved within that fiction by a minor narrative reset. Production continued. Jacob Hopkins was 11 when he took over the role. He voiced Gumball through seasons 3 and 4 and is consistently regarded by fans as a strong interpretation of the character, capturing something about Gumball's particular cadence that held up well across 2 seasons. Nicholas Cantu joined mid-season 5, replacing Hopkins, once Hopkins' voice had also changed. Cantu voiced Gumball through the rest of season 5 and all of season 6, including the series finale. He was 13 when he took the role. After Gumball, Cantu built an online presence as a content creator and animator under the name Junkie Janker, which is an interesting arc for someone who spent several years being the voice of an animated character. He went from performing in animation to producing his own. Darwin had a similar trajectory with different individuals, 4 voice actors across the original run, which sounds like a lot until you remember the show ran for 8 years with real children in the roles. Terrell Ransom Jr. voiced Darwin through seasons 3 and 4. Doniel Hansley Jr. took over for season 5. A few episodes into season 6, Christian J. Simon replaced Hansley. There's something slightly exhausting about tracking this, which is probably why the internet tends to focus on the Gumball recasts and treat Darwin's as a footnote. Logan Grove, the original Gumball, had the most distinctive path of anyone in the voice cast. He left acting after his time on the show and in 2016 enrolled at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, attending as a midshipman until 2020. The original voice of Gumball Watterson became a military officer, which is not the trajectory anyone would have predicted. In December 2017, Logan Grove met Jacob Hopkins and Nicholas Cantu at a reunion. 3 people who had all spent time being the same character's voice, who had mostly never worked on the show at the same time, sharing a specific kind of common experience. 3 people who were Gumball at different points, getting together. Anais, voiced by Kyla Ray Kowalewski throughout the original run, managed to maintain the role because her voice happened not to change enough to force a recasting. She is the only main character who had the same voice actor from the first episode to the last, which is an odd kind of distinction, but a genuine one. Season 7 of the wonderfully weird world of Gumball brought another full recast. Gumball is now voiced by Alcayo Thiele, Darwin by Hero Hunter, and Anais, for the first time ever, by Kinza Syed Khan. The first Anais recast after the entire original run. The complete list of people who have been the voice of Gumball Watterson is now Logan Grove, Jacob Hopkins, Nicholas Cantu, Duke Cutler for short-form spin-off material, and Alcayo Thiele. 5 people at various ages, in various stages of their lives, all saying lines for a blue cat named Gumball who is 12 years old and lives in a fictional American suburb. There is something quietly interesting about this over the full span of it. The character stays 12. The people who give him his voice don't. Logan Grove is in his mid-20s now, a Naval Academy graduate. Jacob Hopkins does anime dubbing. Nicholas Cantu makes animation. Duke Cutler has other projects. Alcayo Thiele is at whatever stage of his life he's at. Meanwhile, in Elmore, Gumball is in year 7 at Elmore Junior High, having an ordinary, extraordinary day. The voice changes around him across 15 years and several different people, and he remains exactly as he was. There is a specific creative commitment in The Kids worth noting. The show could have dealt with the voice change quietly, outside the fiction, and the audience might never have noticed the shift. Instead, the show acknowledged it directly, made an episode about it, and then solved it with a narrative device that is, in retrospect, very characteristic of how the show handled problems. By making the problem part of the story, the logistics of production becoming the subject matter of the show, the same instinct that made the money possible. All the voice actors get a particular kind of permanence from the work. the records exist. Somewhere in the archive of a Cartoon Network production, Logan Grove's voice is saying things as Gumball Watterson, and it will remain there, 12 years old, indefinitely. The experience of watching the show across its original run and noticing the voice changes as they happened is one that binds a particular group of viewers to the show in a specific way. You were watching in real time. You noticed when Logan Grove's voice started breaking. You understood what the kids was doing because you'd heard it happening before the episode addressed it. And then you heard Jacob Hopkins for the first time in season 3 and had to adjust your understanding of the character's voice, which is a strange kind of adjustment to make for a fictional person. The transition between Hopkins and Cantu is the one most fans cite as requiring the longest adjustment period. Hopkins' version of Gumball had a specific quality, a slightly more cautious and observational tone than Logan Grove's early interpretation. Nicholas Cantu brought something different again, a bit more kinetic, which fitted the more visually ambitious late seasons well. By the end of season 6, Cantu's voice was Gumball for a generation of viewers who came to the show after the early Logan Grove seasons. Kwesi Bokye, the original Darwin, has remained relatively low profile after his time on the show. The original voice cast of Gumball scattered in different directions after seasons 1 and 2, which was partly by necessity and partly just the normal way things go when child actors age and projects move on. What they share is a specific historical claim. They were the ones there first. Whatever the show became, they were the first people to say those lines. The question of continuity in voice acting for ongoing animated series is one the industry handles differently across different productions. Some shows replace child actors as a matter of course, and no one discusses it. Gumball made the replacement part of the show, which is unusual and which created something memorable. The Kids is a better episode because it deals directly with what was happening rather than around it. The show, as always, preferred to use its own circumstances as material rather than pretend they weren't there. The Amazing World of Gumball won the International Emmy Kids Award. It won a British Academy Children's Award. These are not minor things. They represent a kind of institutional recognition that animated children's television, particularly the kind made outside the major American studios, doesn't always receive. The show was not just commercially successful. The people who give out awards decided it was genuinely good. But awards are nice. Finding an audience is the actual thing. And finding an audience that stayed active long after new episodes stopped was the more interesting achievement. During the years between the Inquisition in 2019 and the revival in 2025, Gumball fandom did something that fan communities don't always manage. It stayed engaged without new material to sustain it. Fan theories kept accumulating, rewatches kept happening, fan animations and fan art kept being produced. People went back through the whole original run with the knowledge of how the mythology developed, looking for things they'd missed, and kept finding them. Part of this is the general dynamic of fandom. Something that's complete and finite is often easier to engage with obsessively than something ongoing, because you can know the whole thing. Part of it was specific to Gumball, which rewarded close attention in ways that kept generating material for discussion. And part of it was that the show ended with so many things unresolved that there were genuine questions left to theorize about. Not knowing what was going to happen next was, in a strange way, productive. Bockley was fairly available online through this period in the way that some animation creators are. He addressed fan theories, confirmed some, and kept the conversation moving. His statement that the simulation theory would be answered in the new material, that it wouldn't be dark, was exactly the kind of creator communication that generates sustained discussion. Not a full explanation, enough to work with. Nicholas Cantu, who voiced Gumball through the final 2 original seasons, built a YouTube and online presence under the name Junkie Janker, producing animation and comedy. The path from child voice actor to independent content creator is genuinely interesting, and the skill sets are related in ways that aren't obvious from the outside. Learning to perform in animation for several years before learning to make your own has to leave traces. The show produced a number of images and moments that circulated beyond their original context. The generation that grew up on it in the early 2000s carried specific quotes, specific visual gags, specific pieces of absurdist logic into broader online culture. The show's tendency toward extreme visual comedy and unexpected tonal shifts made it generative source material for the short-form sharing that defined that period online. Bocquelet described the revival, the wonderfully weird world of Gumball, in one interview as like being given CPR. He said he had been aware, in developing the new series, of what the fandom had been building and discussing during the years of absence. Not adapting specific fan theories directly, but being conscious of what people had found in the show and what they were hoping for. He mentioned wanting to honour what the audience had been doing with the material in the interim. The revival continued several threads from the original run. The Yuki and Nicole relationship, which had generated sustained fan interest since The Fury, came back for further development. Rob's story, as mentioned, received something approaching resolution. Storylines that had been planned for the cancelled film found a home in the new season. The question of what Gumball actually contributed to animation as a medium is harder to summarise than its awards might suggest. The mixed reality visual approach was noted and discussed, but it hasn't been widely replicated, possibly because it was genuinely difficult to execute well, and the specific combination of elements that made it work is not easily transferred. The metafictional mythology was sophisticated enough to draw comparisons to adult storytelling as much as to children's animation. The commitment to real child voice actors and the creative decision to address their maturation within the show's fiction produced at least one episode that stood out from anything else the show made. More broadly, the show demonstrated that animated children's television can carry weight without becoming dull and carry comedy without becoming shallow, and that these two things can coexist in the same episode without either one undermining the other. This sounds like something that should be obvious. It's actually fairly rare to see done consistently across 6 seasons. The people who watched it as children are in their 20s now. Some of them are the audience the revival is aimed at. Others haven't gone back yet. Others never quite stopped watching, or at least never stopped thinking about it. The show sits in a specific place in the memory of its generation, partly because of what it was, and partly because of the timing of its absence, which made a certain number of people more aware of how much they valued it than they might have been if it had simply kept going. What the show built was a world that people kept returning to, a mythology that's still being extended, and a set of characters that have the particular quality of feeling like they belong somewhere, which is the thing it was trying to give them from the beginning. Rejected characters, unusual designs, things nobody else had found a use for, given a place and made to feel like they fitted there. The show came back, which, for a show about things that almost got erased, is the only appropriate outcome. And it's still going. Season 7 is here. The movie is still listed as being in development somewhere. There is more Gumball in the world than there was 3 years ago, and there may be more after that. The world of Elmore is not particularly interested in staying gone. The show's particular form of comedy, the kind built from visual incongruity and tonal shifting and characters who are clearly in a cartoon while the world around them is built from photographs of real places, influenced how a generation of animators and comedy writers think about what the medium can do. Not through direct imitation. The approach is too specific to Gumball's circumstances to easily copy. But the demonstration that you could do it, that the mixed reality approach could work at the quality level the show achieved, is itself a contribution. There's a version of Gumball's legacy that's about what it said, the theories, the meta-commentary, the things it built over the course of the original run. And there's a version that's about what it was, a very funny show that trusted its audience enough not to explain its jokes, that committed to its premises without flinching, that built characters the audience cared about without making them conventionally admirable. Gumball himself is not an admirable person by most standards. He's self-interested and impulsive, and often wrong. The show never pretended otherwise, and people found him compelling anyway, which is what good character work produces. Richard Watterson, the father, gets less serious attention than Nicole, but is doing something quietly interesting across the full run. He is a character who should be annoying, who should produce resentment in the audience the way he produces work for Nicole, and who mostly doesn't. He's played with a particular quality of guilelessness that distinguishes him from more familiar versions of the useless sitcom dad. He's not withholding effort, he's not passive-aggressive. He simply has a very different relationship with reality from most people, and the show treats this with an affection that makes him funnier than he would otherwise be. The Wattersons as a family unit are the best argument for the show. Each one is a specific kind of person, and together they produce a specific kind of chaos. And watching the specific chaos of this specific family across 6 seasons plus a revival is what the show is ultimately about. Everything else, the mythology, the meta-commentary, the visual approach, the theories, is what happens around a family being themselves. That's a good thing to build a show around. That's the shape of it, or most of the shape. We went through the origin story, the unusual visual world it was built from, the void and the logic behind it, Rob's full arc from background extra to reluctant villain, to something closer to a protector, what was under Penny's shell, the show's long-running conversation with its own fictional nature. Nicole and the power level nobody could quite explain, the things the show was doing below the comedy, the ending that didn't arrive properly, the kids who kept growing up while Gumball stayed 12, and what the show left when it finally finished, or paused, or whatever it's doing now. There are individual episodes and specific moments that didn't make it in, because there always are with a show this layered. That's part of the point of it. You can go through 100 hours of Gumball analysis and still find someone pointing at something you hadn't considered. The show produced more than it needed to. If there's a through line to all of it, I think it's this. A show built from things that were rejected, made by people who were slightly outside the world they were depicting, about a family that didn't quite work but persisted anyway, in a world that kept trying to erase its own mistakes. And the characters it cared about most were never the convenient ones or the straightforward ones. They were the goldfish with legs, the peanut who was made of light, the glitching background character who ended up carrying the whole mythology, the mother who was inexplicably capable in ways the show never bothered to justify. Things that didn't fit, finding somewhere to be. That's enough for tonight. The day is done, and whatever was on your mind when you sat down to watch this has had time to settle. Elmore will still be there. Gumball is still 12, still in some ongoing situation in the corridor of Elmore Junior High, still saying the wrong thing to Penny, still figuring it out. None of that needs your attention right now. Good night.